I have insurance, and so I don't need to focus on anything else other than just my physical well-being, because a bike is completely replaceable. And the fact that you have insurance and that you're protected and you're covered, all you need to do is focus on yourself and getting yourself better. Like, I'm going to try and I'm going to take risks and I'm going to take chances, because why else? Why would you not, right? I'm Alicia Speak. I'm 37. I'm a full-time lawyer, but I'm also a cyclist for Cycle Team London.
How are you? Yeah, depressed. Me too. Never mind. Let's be honest. It's now time to talk about a really hard sport. 80 minutes is not long enough. The suffering is not hard enough. And the shorts are nowhere near tight enough, right? So let's talk about cycling and the sport of road cycling, which is why we're all really here. Let's just forget the rugby for now. It's ancient history as far as I'm concerned. My name is Matt Barbett. I work in cycling a little bit. I do the Tour of Britain for ITV, and this is, I think it's the 4th or 5th year I've been at the Rouleur Classic. I've been here since day one anyway. And working in the theatre here is a real thrill, a real highlight of the year for me, because I get to talk to some fascinating people in the sport of road cycling, the sport that I love, and you get to listen to them as well. And there's some great names coming up on the stage here today. We've got Greg LeMond later on, arguably America's best ever road cyclist. We've got Phil Anderson, one of Australia's greatest as well. Mark Cavendish is going to be here with Matt Stevens and Adam Blythe, and plenty more people as well. Emily Chappell will be joining me very shortly, talk about making the switch from being a courier in London to winning races that transcontinental races in Europe as well. So loads to talk about, loads to listen to, loads to enjoy. But the first person on stage is a man whose voice I am more than familiar with. In fact, I've heard him talk at the Tour of Britain for something like 9 hours a day, 8 days a week. He also did the same thing at the Worlds in Harrogate this year as well. A man who loves to talk. Unfortunately, Jez has only got half an hour today, so you'll have to edit down a little bit. But Jez Cox, who I'm talking about, on the side, when he's not doing his cycling commentary and getting the crowds whipped up for the racing on the roads of Great Britain. Jez trains young people to become the next generation of racing cyclists with his Oakland Wolves Cycling Academy. He has 2 of those young people with him now, so please put your hands together. A warm welcome for Jez.
Thank you, Matt. Cheers, thank you. Morning, everyone. We're going to do our best to try and lift things a little bit after that. For those of you who were there for the rugby, I'm joined on stage by Elizabeth Marvelli and Angus Hawkins. Can you put your hands together for these 2 as well? We're going to have a little bit of a chat for you. I know we've got quite a few people in the audience who are interested to hear a little bit more about what was the first full-time junior cycling academy in the United Kingdom. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. If you want to find out more information about it, particularly if you're interested for youngsters, maybe clubs you're involved with, or some of the youngsters I see in front of me right now, I've put some booklets on the end of the aisles here. Angus is actually the rider on the front, so maybe we can have some kind of like booklet signing session afterwards. These 2 are here for good reason. They were in our first intake, so we're now into the 3rd year of the Oakland Wolves Cycling Academy. And Angus and Lizzie were in our first intake. They graduated last year, so they're both now 18 years of age. It's a junior racing academy based in Hertfordshire. And we want to use the next 30 minutes really to sort of not just talk about the academy and what we do, but to have a think about what it means to be a junior racing cyclist in this country in the first place, and have a little think about why that gap between youth racing and junior racing, and then the gap between junior racing and then progressing to being under 23 and a senior, is such a pivotal time. I'm very lucky myself in that not just running the academy and doing the commentary that I do alongside Matt, as he was saying, that I've managed to live my life kind of through and involved with cycling all the way through, and I'm very blessed and lucky to have done that. But in a way, it's down to people that I met when I was their age. I was inspired by great people around me when I was their age, and I was in Twickenham Cycling Club, and some of you will know the likes of people like Graham McNamee and great people involved with certain clubs that inspire youngsters and keep them going. And people sat in the room in front of me now, young and old, I'm sure will be able to think of people who've kept them interested in cycling or who got them interested in cycling in the first place. We live in a really exciting time for cycling in this country, as you'll know. Even more exciting than being a rugby fan right now in particular. But there are such a wealth of opportunities to get involved with great clubs that are being developed and furthered through British cycling itself, but through just the wave that we're still riding since 2012 and beyond, in actual fact. I'm very lucky in that after I sort of progressed my way out of competing and racing and traveling the world, I was given a really special job in 2012 to write the legacy plan for the London Olympic Games for cycling. So my job was really to look at all the great things that were going on around the Games in 2012 and harness and design a legacy for that would inspire youngsters and give them opportunities to do more. Of course, this was done in partnership with British Cycling, and that journey with British Cycling itself started way, way beyond that with the development of the world-class performance plan, the Go Ride programs, all the initiatives being run in schools and clubs, and the development of coaches, all the great things that have helped to bring riders like these two to this point, because Lizzie and Angus both came through great Go Ride clubs that had been given input from British Cycling in terms of coaching and in terms of development and in terms of opportunities and that sort of thing. So what I want to think about today is that difference between being a youth rider in a traditional youth cycling club in Great Britain and then transitioning into being a junior rider. It's the age at which we lose an awful lot of riders from our sport. Some of those riders are super talented riders that could have gone on to great things. Others are just cyclists that enjoyed riding their bike, and somewhere between that age of 16, 17, 18, they tend to lose their way. Thankfully now, it's not just us. There's loads of people out there finding new pathways and opportunities for those riders to keep progressing. And this is not, and the Oakland Wolves Cycling Academy program is not about just trying to generate the next stars. It is very much about keeping young riders engaged with loving and enjoying cycling. Before I tell you a little bit more about the actual program itself and the academy and how it works, something that I've learned, and I'm actually here with my wife Leda today because we run the academy together, and Leda's a former professional, so she's got a lot of experience in the sport. Something that we see all the time, if I could pass any advice on to parents that are here today and to young riders, is this. The number one reasons, or the tightest reasons, the most specific reasons that we lose riders at that age of 16, 17, is either because they get to a point where they think maybe they're not as good as they thought they were, but one of the really big reasons, and we're seeing this increasingly, is that age at which young riders start to have to want to do it for themselves. These two came out of great youth cycling clubs, Hillingdon Slipstreamers and Palmer Park Velo. What makes those clubs great? Well, actually, what makes them great from the first place is the people in them who are inspiring young riders. It's also the fact that they have designated off-road cycling areas. So in this instance, it's Hillingdon Cycle Circuit and then the Palmer Park Velodrome as well. Once you become a junior rider, all of a sudden you're really becoming a senior rider. When you become a junior rider in Great Britain, if you're a cyclocross rider, it'd be great. You can turn up cyclocross races and you do the junior race. In terms of track and road, when you're a junior rider, you're really a senior rider immediately who's allowed to ride in junior national series and national championship races, because there aren't many other junior races, certainly not on the road. So you're really thrown right in the deep end at the age of 16. You really become a senior rider then. It's just that you can still do some junior championship races, and that's a really tough environment. One of the big things we have noticed, and we're happy to say this, in our academy every year we lose some riders. There's some riders who don't stay with us. And it's not necessarily because we're pushing them too hard or training them too hard. Hopefully these guys would agree with that, I don't know. It's often because the riders suddenly realize they need to be doing it for themselves. And there is a point, and we have riders that come to us sometimes who are kind of on a journey where their parents have invested an awful lot of money, an awful lot of time, the club has, they feel a bit of pressure on themselves. We run a trial for our academy, so we are slightly selective, but the riders will come up to a point where they realize they have to be doing it for themselves. And we have, during the course of the academy, riders often will start driving, and they get their own car, they're taking themselves to races. All of a sudden, they're not going to races with their parents anymore, and they're having to do it for themselves. And it's that point at which the young riders effectively become young adults and start striking out and making their own decisions about how much they want to do, because they're not being dropped off at the track anymore to do their training in the way they have done before. They're now out there doing it for themselves. So it's a really pivotal time at which young riders have to strike out and start to make their own decisions about why they want to do things. During that course of, in fact, during 2012 itself, I was at a very well-known youth cycling venue. I won't say where it was. And I was listening in on some of the young riders. I've been having a chat with them. I was listening to them, and I heard one of the riders say, "Yeah, I'm doing really well, but if I don't make it onto the program, I'm done." And his mate said, "What do you mean you're done?" He said, "I'm going to quit cycling. What's the point?" The programs that British Cycling set up, the world-class programs, including the sort of youth academy, now it's called the apprenticeship program, the junior programs, are absolutely brilliant at bringing on and drawing on young talent, and then eventually feeding them into the Great Britain cycling team. But around it, on the edges of that, sometimes those programs, and Tom Stanton's going to be here talking about those programs later on today, it's well worth having a listen to that. On the edge of them, some young riders can become disillusioned. I don't know about you guys, particularly I'm sure some of the adults and parents here will have seen on Twitter and Instagram this week, new young riders being brought into the apprenticeship program. They're given a Great Britain jersey and feeling really proud about that. It's an awful lot of pressure on youngsters, but around the edge of them, some of their friends from the same clubs they were in might be thinking, great, okay, where do I go now? What do I do? Our academy is partly there to try and fill that gap a little bit and give young riders an opportunity to train full time and to hopefully kind of bring them on and inspire them in a slightly different way. And it's not just about creating great races, it's also about keeping young people in love with cycling. I'll just talk you through just a little bit about what we do. As I say, we started 3 years ago. This was last year's intake of riders. It's an endurance racing academy. We do have, though, randomly, and I don't like to talk about it too often, we have two brilliant track sprinters in our academy who we kind of bring along with us, but we're not a sprinting academy. It's very much an endurance academy, and really it's kind of road focused, but nearly all of them race cyclocross. We're based in Hertfordshire, in St Albans, but our riders come from all over the country. In actual fact, now, we had a young guy this year come from Mexico to be in the academy. Most of them live on site. Angus lived on site, but Lizzie, when she was with us, they were both with us up until last year, lived not too far away in Boreham Wood in Hertfordshire, so she would ride in every day, ride in, come training with us, and then ride home. That's where we're based. It's a brilliant location for training because it's set in beautiful countryside, and we can sort of dip into about 4 or 5 different counties all in one ride as well. It's set amongst a whole series of other academies, and I was actually brought in to do a bit of consultation work with the other academies and see how we could improve the way they coach and the way they do things together, and it just made so much sense to try and set up a cycling academy. The cycling academy, like all the others, aims to create great future stars, but most importantly, retain young people enjoying, loving their sport, and that's not easy. It's quite tough to do. Along the way, we've had some brilliant results. I sometimes look at these numbers, and I tally them up as best I can as we go along, and the numbers actually are incredible in the space of 3 years. 101 wins. That 101st win was actually last weekend because we have a lot of riders riding cyclocross. Regionally, we tend to win most of the regional races that our riders do, and then the aim is to encourage them through that and bring them on through that and push them on to that national level as well. Angus was a winner of one of the National Series Junior National Series rounds this year of the Bath Road Club round, and I'll see a picture of that in a little bit. Lizzie went on to become National 25-mile time trial champion as well. So these are, if you like, the end product of what we do, and we'll have a chat in a little bit about where they're going next and how they're progressing through that. But there's some of the numbers that we've managed to generate since we started in 2017. This is some of our guys out training last year on the road. I'll just track you through a few photos as well. Road, cyclocross. This is Jack Parish from the Eastern region. We're very lucky in that very near where we're based, we have this enormous sandpit. We quite often do little videos and things. If you check us out on social media, you'll see loads of videos of us messing around in the sandpit. We're really lucky to have it. We don't quite know why it's there, but we don't care. We just don't tell people where it is too often. But we were in there actually last week doing an awful lot of work. Oh, that's actually you. We're just down the road from Gosling Stadium Velodrome, where Welwyn Wheelers are based. So this is another home of one of our great youth cycling clubs, and we use that velodrome an awful lot. It's just been resurfaced as well, in case any of you haven't seen it. My wife, Leda, who's sat at the back over there, is our physiotherapist, as well as being one of our coaches, and we're very lucky to have a physio unit based at Oaklands as well. So all the riders have their physiotherapy and all of their kind of physical preparation taken care of in there. We have a full-time strength and conditioning coach as well, based in our performance gym. They train in the same gym where the Saracens Academy players train, where a lot of GB athletes train as well from our track and field program as well. And a lot of these riders live in the same houses when they live on site as GB track sprinters, athletic sprinters I should say, professional basketball players. So we mesh a lot of these sports as they come together where we're based in St Albans. We're going to delve a little bit deeper into the experience of these two riders now while they're here. Angus is sat here. This is a picture of Angus winning the Bath Road Club round of the Junior National Road Series this year. And that was Lizzie actually riding towards her National 25 Championship as well. I've written a few questions, so you'll forgive me if I just pick them up a bit. We'll start with Lizzie first. We might have a little bit of time at the end where you might want to ask some questions of either me or of these guys, because they've got an awful lot of experience of racing at that level as junior riders. For those of you who might not be aware, by the way, the youth ages start. I've got my 2 little kids there actually, and technically my girl's 4, but she races in the under 8s. She started already last year. Under 8s is the youngest youth cat. I think it's called Youth E, and then it goes E, D, C, B, A, and Youth A is under 16s basically. After that, you become a junior. Okay, but as I say, it's really important that you don't think of junior as being like the next youth category. It's really not. You really do become a senior rider at the age of 16. It's just you can do some junior races as well. That's right, though, isn't it? It really is like that. Lizzie, I mentioned that the 2 of you both come through really good youth cycling clubs. Okay, both of your clubs, Hillingdon Slipstreamers and Palmer Park Velo, effectively. They take you up to the age of 16, don't they? So what I'm wondering is maybe what does a rider need to do once they finish being a youth rider, or what's the difference between being a youth rider and being a junior rider, and what do they need to do to progress?
Like firstly, there's like quite a big difference between youth racing and junior racing. Like for the boys, they're doing like 50-kilometre crit, and then they're thrust into junior racing where they're doing 130-kilometre like road races. So the training does have to change. You know, like you can start that in the winter, doing longer miles, maybe riding with adults, because you do a lot of that. Just practicing riding with adults, riding on the road for long periods of time, just training your body to get stronger and just cope with that massive change in racing. It changes quite a lot.
I guess that's one of the big differences, isn't it? That you for those of you that maybe don't know, the youth racing as well, even on the road, tends to be on. It is all on closed circuits, so it's either at purpose-built circuits or they close the circuit, don't they? So when you become a junior, you're literally straight out on the open road.
Oh yeah, you get a lot of cars. You can sometimes get horses and stuff. It is proper British roads, potholes. You have to get used to racing on that completely different environment. It can be quite daunting, quite scary. You still have to obey the rules of the road. You know, they can't just close it off for you. So you've got to familiarise yourself with that and be quite vigilant when you're racing. You actually have to think about it. You can't just whack around the circuit for an hour and just you're done. You've got to really think about your racing.
Elizabeth is one of those riders who, as I say, came from a great cycling club in West London, Hillingdon Slipstreamers, based at the Hillingdon Cycle Circuit, and she still goes back even now and does things with the young riders there, helps out with a bit of coaching and inspiring them and riding with them, don't you? She now races for, and has been for 2 years racing for the Liv Awol Spoked team. It was Liv Awol, Admiral Liv Awol last year, wasn't it? And this year it's Liv Awol Spoked, which is a junior and under-23 women's racing team. So she's been racing in Tour Series with them this year, Women's National Series, and then going abroad to race in UCI races with their junior team as well. How important, Lizzie, is it important to be in a team? Because I know this is one of those things that you wrestle with. You're leaving Hillingdon Slipstreams, this fantastic traditional youth cycling club, and suddenly going into a very heavily sponsored, very elite-looking team. Do you need to do that as a junior, and what is your advice?
It's really nice being in a team, and it can look quite idealistic. You're like, right, you're getting a nice bike, you know, you're doing these, you're getting a lot of stuff for you, but you don't need to at junior level. There's a lot of pressure at getting into the best teams. You don't necessarily need to. It just depends what you're targeting. If you want to do UCI races and get into some races abroad, it is helpful being in a team because some teams will take you out there, and that really helps, especially if you're self-funded. But if you're looking to race in the UK, you just want to develop yourself. You don't have to be in a team. For junior national races, you don't actually need to be in a team to qualify for them, especially in the women's ones.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. That I've seen races that we have quite often. I see riders from our academy who join teams, and then you'll go to see a national series race, and there'll be 4 or 5 of them all in the same race, and that race is really important to all of them. So they all want to be in the break, and it effectively becomes a race to try and be the first rider to get into that breakaway, and it's a really tough thing to handle, that, isn't it? I'm very lucky in that I get to commentate on quite a lot of the biggest British races. One of them is the Tour Series, and I've commentated on Lizzie doing a good number of those Tour Series rounds as a junior. Now think about this. This is one of the other tough things about being a junior rider. They ride on restricted gears all the time. So I was there I was doing the live commentary for the Tour Series round in Durham where Tom Pidcock won. Now he won, he came across the line. The first thing that happened was the commentator said, "Thank you very much, I'll have that." Took his bike away and went and wheeled it out. I mean, he'd just beaten all the senior riders, and actually he'd lapped more than half the field by himself, Tom Pidcock, but he was still a junior. So his bike still had to be measured out again afterwards to check his gear still fitted, and thankfully it did. But it's a tough thing. And this year just gone, I was commentating on Lizzie watching, and it's quite an awkward thing for me as a coach. I've got a microphone in my hand, I'm trying to be impartial and commentate on the race, and I'm seeing Lizzie come past, and the first thing I'm thinking is, move up, and I can't say it. But every time she'd come past me in nearly all those races, she's in her biggest gear. Why? Because she's on her junior restricted gear. That's just the way it is. And it's adhered to by the British cycling commissaires absolutely down to the wire. And in a way, it's a good thing. But if you go to watch any of those big senior races, particularly the Tour Series, where both in the men's and the women's, we have a lot of junior riders riding, trust me, they're having a really tough time out there because they are spinning out a lot, particularly the courses that have a long descent in them, and you've done some like that. How hard is that, Lizzie? Because you've ridden not only Tour Series this year, but some of the women's bigger races as well, National Series races and stuff.
Yeah, and then I went on to do like a senior UCI on my restricted gears, which was quite interesting. You do get used to it because it's what you know, but you are spinning really fast, your cadence is really high, and if you're used to just grinding hard gears, that can be really difficult. It's it's different muscles you're using, it's more work on your heart. So you get used to it, but you're spinning as fast, like Motherwell Tour Series, as a slight descent. I remember I was like spinning really hard, and that was the bit I was struggling on the most because it was downhill and we're going so quick and I'm just spinning so fast. Even in the bunch, you're still going really quick, like your legs. It's tough, but you get used to it. And then when you move up to senior gears, like in my training, I've moved up to senior gears. I'm like, oh, this is hard, you know.
Angus, I'm going to move on to you because we're sort of run out of time in a minute. But you came through Palmer Park as well, and have been racing this year for the Zappi Juniors team as well, this year and last year, in actual fact, I should say. You've had an incredible 2 years, though, as a junior, because you're kind of, in a way, you're sort of one of those riders who could easily have been lost from the sport because of the tough things you've had to go through. And one of the reasons that Leda and I and the whole academy got so much joy out of seeing Angus, and I was actually commentating on the National Circuit Champs in Rochester when my phone pinged and I happened to look down my pocket and I heard that Angus had won. And for us in particular, it was such a brilliant moment because of what you'd been through. You had a back injury prior to becoming a junior that took a lot of time out at the end of your youth years. And then last winter, you spent a lot of the winter off the bike working with Leda as your physio because of a knee injury. How do you keep going? What motivates you to keep going through those? What has kept you going through those 2 junior years?
Well, when I had my back injury, that was probably a lot harder than my knee injury because that was at the end of being a youth, an under 16. Took a lot of time out for that, and then kind of came back towards the end of the season, just doing races for fun, really. And then I joined Oaklands, had a first good year in junior, and then towards the end of that year, had a knee injury. But then just working with Leda in the physio room, getting better. Obviously had to take time off the bike, but then still saw everyone every day at Oaklands. You go to class with your friends, still go to gym and you see people in the physio room. Just working, getting back on the bike, really. It was hard, but I knew I had a good season lined up with Zappi. I knew I was going to do a full UCI calendar with them. So I had a lot of races to look forward to and to build up to.
Like lots of the young riders in here, these two and most of the riders in our academy will have come through doing things like Assen, so getting involved with youth tours in Europe. But you've both, over the last 2 years, spent an awful lot of time going abroad and racing, and it's something that we give them time off from college life, if you like, and from academy life to go and do. How important is it, Angus, to do, for you, how important has that been to be going abroad and racing at the highest level and then coming back to the UK? What's that like?
Well, I think all the pro races are abroad. If you want to become a pro, then that's where you've got to be. So to experience that as a junior, I think is very beneficial because you come back they're not too different to a junior national, but there's just a lot more people. The roads are very different. You get closed roads for a junior UCI, whereas you don't get a closed road in the UK.
No.
So you still get a lot of crashes, but less cars involved, so it's good.
That helps. Just finally, Angus, I'm thinking it might be the picture behind us here, but I'm wondering, in your 2 years as a junior, the 2 years as a junior racing cyclist go real quickly. Was there a moment that, for you, you felt was a breakthrough, where you thought, do you know what, I can do this. This is what I want to do?
Definitely that win at the National. Yeah, and that was a good, because I had a bit of a dip in my season, not too good form. And then I came back. This was the week before National Champs. I came into it, I knew I was feeling good that week. I was like, yes, I'm going to get a good result this week, and then that will set me up well for National Champs. And yeah, I just couldn't believe it. Across the line, and it's not a video, but there is a video somewhere of me just screaming, like straight over the line. I didn't know what to do. And then, yeah, the next few weeks after that had my best results of the season. Came sixth at the Johan Mezu Classic UCI in Belgium. That was also a highlight of my season. Yeah, that was pretty good.
We are starting to eat into the next item on our talk schedule, but just finally, guys, what's next for you two? Lizzie, what's next?
I'm focusing next year on the Women's National Series, because I had to do it this year, as junior girls don't get as many junior races, so I was already doing it, but I want to focus on it more and like try and be competitive, and just junior nationals, tour series, and then hopefully go on to do some races abroad with my team.
Angus?
I think my aim next year is to just keep building my experience and hopefully get some results in some good races. I'd like to go abroad for a lot of the season, but we'll have to see what teams come my way. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Can I ask you to put your hands together for Angus Hawkins and Elizabeth Marvelli? Thank you all for listening, and if you are interested in finding out more about the Academy, I've actually put some of the booklets on the end of the little benches down here as well. I was kind of joking about Angus signing it, but you never know where these young riders are going to go on to, you see. You might be getting the autograph of a future Women's Giro winner or Tour de France winner. You never know. They're both in there anyway. Do pick one up. If you want to have a chat about anything about it, ask any questions, do feel free so afterwards. Enjoy the rest of the day, particularly if you're one of the youngsters who's got in here free today. It's such a brilliant thing that Rouleur Classic are doing on a Saturday, opening up to the under-16s for free. Make the most of it. Have a great day, and happy Christmas. Get that one in early. Have a lovely day. Enjoy. Thank you.